everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Erica with Confessions of a Homeschooler, and today I have a sewing tutorial for you. I'm going to show you how to make this really fun sewing machine mat. You can kind of customize the size of pockets to fit whatever tools you like to keep handy. This project really only takes about an hour to make. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the supplies for our project are pretty simple. You're going to need some batting for the main portion of the mat and then some for the pockets. You'll also need some fabric for the lining and backing. You'll need some fabric for the lining of the front pocket, and then you'll need some fun little prints for all of the different front pockets that we're going to make. This is a great scrap buster, stash buster type project because most of these, as you can see, are relatively small. And then you also need some fabric for your binding. And then I've labeled all of mine with these cute little alphabetties. You don't have to do that. It's just easier for me to keep everything organized. And these numbers or letters will also correlate with the PDF pattern that you can download below. They'll be in the description box below this video. They will have all the exact cutting measurements and everything you need to make this project. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're gonna start with the Patchwork Pocket, and these will be pieces G on your pattern. And so you're gonna need 9 of these little 2" by 2" squares, and you're going to sew them together in patchwork. So this row together, then this row together, then this row together, and then sew rows 1 and 2 together and rows 2 and 3 together, and you'll have a nice little patchwork square. In order to do this, I like to just take my second row here and lay it right side down on my first row. And then I'm just gonna take this to my sewing machine and we're gonna sew 1/4 inch all the way down this edge and not break your threads in between. We'll bring that back over here, open them up, and then add these. Okay, so here we are, and I still have the little threads connecting them. I never cut those. And I just took it over to my ironing board and I pressed the top row to the right, the middle row to the left, and then the bottom row to the right. And that'll help nest our seams. So we're gonna take this top row, fold it down on to the middle row. And then right here you can kind of see I've got one seam going this way and one seam going that way. And you can kind of just lock those together like that. And that'll make nice, crisp points where your patchwork panels meet. I'm just going to take this to my sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch down this side. Then I'll open that up, and then I'll fold this one up, nest my seams again, and sew 1/4 inch down this side, and then we'll have a completed panel. Okay, so here's our panel. I just took it over and just pressed it so it's nice and flat. I also trimmed it up to 5 by 5, and then we're gonna set this one aside and work on our next one. So here are all my little pieces, and I'm going to take both of my piece Ds, and then we're going to take these little tiny ones, and these are piece E, I believe, and we're going to put one on the top right and left corner of our piece D fabrics. And I'm putting these right sides together. And then I'm gonna just sew from corner to corner this way and corner to corner this way on both of them. You can draw a line on the back of your piece E fabrics as well. These are pretty tiny, so you can also just kind of wing it if you want. Oops, I made that one going the wrong way. We'll turn it this way. There we go. We're also going to take our fabric F squares, turn those upside down, and draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on those as well. Do that on this one as well. And I'm not going to sew these yet. We'll come back and add those on, but essentially we are going to put them on the bottoms of our D rectangles here, and then we'll sew on those lines as well. We'll cut 1/4 inch away from our stitch lines and press all of these little white pieces open to reveal our heart shape. All right, so I've pressed those tips open. The next thing I'm gonna do is just place our pieces right sides together here, and then sew 1/4 inch right down the center, and then when we open it, we'll have a heart. I'm just gonna press that seam the other way so it nests. All right, here it is. I've gone ahead and pressed it, and I'm just gonna go ahead and set our heart block aside. Okay, the next pocket we're gonna work on is our kind of like 3-piece pocket here. And so I've got all my little pieces labeled for us. The first thing that we're gonna do is just take piece I and piece H. I'm just gonna put it right sides together. It actually doesn't really matter which side you put H on. I kind of want it on the right side. We're gonna sew it 1/4 inch right here and then press this open. All right, so that's that piece. I just went ahead and pressed it already, pretty straightforward. Now we're gonna work on our piece J, and I've got 2 pieces here. One is for the outside and one is for the lining. So we're gonna put our lining right side down, and we're gonna put our piece of S batting on top of that. And then we're going to put our other piece right side up. And you can use Fusible Fleece here and just press it so it stays together. Or you can just put a little spray base on here so it stays in place while we're going to be assembling our pocket here. The next thing that we're going to do is take our piece K binding strip. And all I've done with our piece is just folded it in half, wrong sides together, and pressed it. And we're going to take the raw edges of that and just place it up against the raw edges of our little pocket here. I'm gonna run a stitch right down this edge to secure all 3 of my layers plus my binding, and I'm gonna do it about 1/4 inch. All right, so we have this little piece. We're just gonna press our binding up and fold it around to the other side. And then we're just gonna run a stitch all the way down this other side here just to attach it. All right, so here's our first piece, and then here's our little pocket that we created. And we're gonna go ahead and just line that up just like this. And you can kind of pin this in place. So here's our little pocket we just created. Here's our heart, and here's our patchwork panel. And then I pulled down a square M, or N, L, and M, and we're basically just gonna sew all of these together. So I'll just sew the N to this pocket, and then add the heart, add the L, add the M, and add our pocket to create one long strip. Okay, so here is our finished panel, and I just pressed it so it's nice and flat, and then I actually just swapped the placing of these two just because I felt like it made my heart stand out a little bit more. So it'll depend on what color fabric you use, but I thought this just looked a little bit nicer. It won't change the width of your project at all if you move things around. Now we're going to take the pocket lining, and this was piece C. We're going to place it right side down. We're going to take our batting for the top of that and just lay it nice on there. This was piece R. And then we're going to place our whole pocket on top of that. And then you can either use some Wonder Clips or a little bit of spray adhesive. I have a little bit of this 505 spray adhesive. I'm just gonna use just a tiny bit just to keep this from moving around on me. I didn't even hardly use any, but it'll just hold it still enough that when I go over to sew, it won't go anywhere. Just gonna add a little to the back side as well. Okay. And then just make sure when you are attaching this little side pocket, I forgot to mention this, just make sure this pocket is on here but free to open and close. All right, next we're gonna take our binding strip K, and I just folded it in half lengthwise, wrong sides together, just like I did our other little binding strip, and pressed it. And now we're going to take the raw edge of that binding strip, so the strip that opens, and place it up here along the raw edge of our pocket. And then just like we did with this one, we're going to sew down this edge to secure it, flip it over the back side and sew again, and then it'll look just like this little pocket here. So here is what our panel should be looking like. We have some fun pocket stuff on the front. This guy is still flipped open, and then we've got our pocket lining on the back with our nice binding along the top here. We're gonna go ahead and set this aside. The hard part is over. And now we're gonna grab our A and B pieces, which are the front and back of our mat. And I'm going to sandwich this together with another piece of batting. So I'm gonna take away one of these pieces and try and zoom out for you here so you can kind of see what's happening. And don't worry about this right here. This is just a seam. I did not have enough of this fabric, so I had to seam a piece together so I could make it the right size. So we're gonna go ahead and lay that, one of our pieces, right side down. Take our piece of batting and place that on top of that. And then we're gonna take our other piece, outside piece, and place it on top of that, right side up. And then I am gonna use, you can again use pins or basting spray here, it's totally up to you. I'm again gonna grab my 505 spray here. And I'm just gonna pull it back and just add a little bit of spray to that just to hold it in place. And then I'm gonna take it over to my machine and just do a little bit of quilting on it just for some decoration. I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing to the back side here. Just add a little bit. I'm not adding a whole lot of spray, just enough to hold it in place for me. Okay, so I'm going to just take this little sandwich bit over here to my machine, and I'm going to do some quilting on it. You can of course do anything you want. I'll probably just do some straight lines following these diagonals, but you could do free motion quilting or anything that you wanted to do here. If you don't like to quilt at all, you can use a piece of fusible fleece instead and just fuse it to your fabric, and then you don't have to do any quilting at all. All right, so I am done quilting my piece here, and I just followed these diagonals, so nothing super fancy, but it's all stuck together now. The next thing we're gonna do is take our little patchwork pocket here, and we're going to just line up the raw edges down here at the very bottom of our panel. And you can use some wonder clips here, or you can use pins or whatever. I just like to throw a few wonder clips on just to kind of hold it in place so that it doesn't move around on me. All right, and here's where you can kind of decide, I don't want to lock that one down. Here's where you can kind of decide where you want your pockets. So I'm going to flip this open, and I'm going to sew right in this seam, and I'm going to do a back stitch right here at the top, and that'll create two pockets out of this panel. I'm going to sew down this seam, down this seam. I'm actually going to sew everywhere that I have these little panels. You could actually just sew from here to here and have one big panel. You could not do it at all and just have one like huge panel. You know, you can make skinny little panels. Those are handy for pins and seam rippers, things like that. It's totally up to you on how many little pockets you want along this. I'm going to go ahead and just follow my seam lines and do one everywhere that I have you know, attached like a larger piece here. Okay, here we are. This is what it's looking like, and now we have all these little individual pockets in here. Super cute. And then this one is still just flapping out here in the breeze. Don't worry about that. We're going to take care of him in just a minute. We're going to go ahead and set our panel aside now. And we're going to prepare our binding, and this is piece P. By the way, if I'm saying any of the wrong letters, ignore me and do what's written in the PDF download pattern, because sometimes I grab the wrong letter. Okay, so here are both of my pieces, and these are just 2.5 by width of fabric pieces, and we're just going to take them, and I'm just going to do a straight binding. There's lots of different ways to do this, you guys, but we're going to take these two, place them right side together, and then just sew right down here 1/4 of an inch, just so that we make one big long strip. And then I'm going to take this over to my ironing board, and again, just like we did with the other binding, I'm going to press it lengthwise like this, so that I have right side showing, wrong sides are pressed in together. All right, guys, here is our binding fully prepared. Next thing we have to do is bind our project, and then we're going to be done. So I'm going to start, I think probably up here on the top, actually, because that'll be less bulk. There's a lot of bulk happening down here. And I'm going to take my binding and line the open or raw edge up against the top of my project here. And somewhere in the middle is where I'm going to start. Now I'm going to lay my piece of fabric right here, but I'm actually not going to start sewing until closer down here. And you'll see why when we go to attach the ends together. So give yourself a nice tail right here, and start sewing maybe a few inches away from the corner. We're going to sew 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll show you how to handle these corners. Okay, like I said, my tail is free up here about halfway, and I'm going to start down here in the corner, and I'm going to go ahead and do a back stitch right here, and then we're going to sew down, and we're going to stop when we get to 1/4 of an inch away from where this edge is. Okay, so about there. We're going to leave our needle in the down position, lift up our presser foot, and we're going to turn it about 45 degrees. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm just going to back stitch just a little bit to kind of lock that into place and cut our thread. Now we're going to pull out our project here and turn it. And then I'm just going to place my finger right here and take my binding strip and fold it up and pull it so that you've got a little kind of diagonal seam here, and this raw edge is now lining up with this raw edge. I'm going to kind of just leave my finger there, and then I'm going to pull it straight down toward me. Okay, and what that's going to create is this little kind of little triangle right here. That's going to be our mitered corner, and we're going to go ahead and just keep on sewing. We're going to do the same thing when we get down to the next corner. Just make sure that's lined up. Okay, so this is our last edge where we're going to be meeting our other piece right here. So I just sewed in a few inches, did a back stitch, and then I will show you how to join these two edges. Okay, so here are our open edges, and we need to be able to join these together. And there's a couple different ways to do this. I'm just going to do a straight join because it's just easier, and this is a small project. But you can do it however you're most comfortable with. You're going to have this piece laid nice and flat and just kind of smooth it out. And then you're going to lay this piece on top of that one, and you want them to overlap by about 1/4 of an inch. And it's probably kind of hard for you to see, but I can see my 1/4 of an inch mark is about right there. Okay, and you just want them, just make sure everything's nice and flush when you mark your 1/4 of an inch. I can see my kind of finger press mark there. I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler and place it right on my finger press mark and trim off this excess. Okay, we're going to set that aside, and now you can see they overlap by about 1/4 of an inch. So now we're going to take these two pieces and just make sure they don't twist or anything, and you're just going to bring them together like this. And then you can open them up. We're basically just putting them right sides together, just like we sewed our binding together initially. And then we're just going to take this to our machine, and we're just going to stitch 1/4 of an inch down this to secure these pieces. And like I said, just make sure they're not twisted or anything, and you should be good to go. I find that it's helpful if you kind of fold up your project like this when you carry it over the machine. It releases the tension on these pieces since it's kind of tight. You can also stick a pin in here if you want so they don't move around on you when you get over to your machine. Okay, so I went ahead and just sewed that really quickly. I didn't think you guys needed to see it. Nothing fancy. But now when we kind of open this up, okay, here's a little bit wider view so you can see. So here's our binding. If you didn't twist anything, it should be looking like this. I just finger pressed my seam open there, and then now we can just take this whole thing back over to our machine and just finish sewing along this open edge. And my stitch line stopped right here, so I'm just going to go back behind it about an inch or so, do a back stitch, and then just keep on going. Now we're going to flip our project over and pull that binding out from the other side, and just like we did our pocket, we're just going to flip it around this back side here. Doesn't really matter where you start, and secure that edge. And you can also hand stitch this. I do have a hand stitch binding tutorial. Okay, when you get to your first corner down here, you're going to just kind of poke your finger to poke that corner out. It's like this to start. Just flip it up. And then we're going to fold up our bottom strip, put our finger there, and then fold the side strip over, making this little mitered edge right here. Oop. And when I get to that edge, I'll usually do a back stitch. Leave your needle in a down position, lift your presser foot, turn your project, and then you can just keep sewing. Alright guys, that's it for this project. The last thing we need to do is just fill this guy with goodies and get to sewing. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. That way I know to keep making these fun projects for you. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.